lot of where we have to be with this. It's a huge issue. It's going to be around. Um, I've done a lot of research on pornography, and it's going to be around for a long time. It's a bajillion-dollar business, and so it's something we have to deal with. Okay. Is that the end of your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely some of the long-term effects, but then I think that's how I handle it. To condemn it, to continue to come down on it and condemn it, all that does is freeze the behavior. It doesn't allow it to move. Seriously, and I know we use that word grace over and over again, but grace is the only thing that allows that even some kind of plasticity to be able to modify that behavior or change that behavior. And so remember, I'm doing my best to look at my spouse through the lens that we're broken. Humanity's broken. Sexuality is broken. He's broken. I'm broken. And how do I let grace come into that? Again, grace is not a stamp of approval or a dismissal of how that might have affected you, but it's everything that you need for it to be something that you could even resolve in your life. Where you at?
Okay, how can a man last longer? Not PE, premature ejaculation, more like after multiple minutes with no condoms. There is one, I think there's the reality of what your body can do. Your penis is a friend, it's not a machine. Okay? Just say. Technically, I love the Viagra commercials, that if you have priapus for longer than 4 hours, if you have an erection for 4 hours, you need to go somewhere. Right? I mean,
you need to get to seriously medical attention.
Yeah, because that's what priapus is, and you're like, that's not a pleasant thought. But it just can't be good for you. There's that. I think you can, again, you can take the Viagra, and it will probably give you a little bit more of that firmness for a bit longer. There are techniques you can use rather than tell you that they are in this book, The Celebration of Sex. I love this book. Dr. Rosenau is kind of one of my mentors in this field. And the beauty of this is because it's just straightforward, and it talks about how God sees this, but also it talks about some new sexual positions, and it's very graphically put together. It's just a good book done with a great deal of care and concern for the sexuality issue.
Yeah, and I'd be curious the motivation behind it lasting more than a few minutes. Is that for my own orgasm? Then maybe we can incorporate more like oral sex beforehand, or
there's a self-management effect that goes with that too. That we talked a lot about mindfulness and being able to just calm yourself down and kind of retract that a little bit. I mean, I think that's true for women and men, that being in the moment and knowing your body and what your body is doing. Not being off in left field and just wondering, hope it's going to make it, but really actually being self-aware enough that you know what your body is doing to a certain degree. And there's always, there's also some technique you can pinch the tip of the penis and like
and messing with rhythms, effect, you know what I mean? Messing with rhythms, like not letting it get too rhythmic, stopping the sensation, changing positions allows for longevity of an erection for orgasm.
And I think all those things would work. The other question is, where does God draw the line between acceptable and holy in the bedroom and getting into not okay territory? Toys, anal masturbation, role playing. Again, I think toys, anal masturbation, we've kind of covered some of those. I think there's room for that. Again, we're in an exclusive relationship with those things. I think that's when we're in trouble. And I can't say it enough. It needs to go through this filter, and it needs to go through the filter of Christ. Role playing, we didn't talk a whole lot about fantasy, and I think there's room for that also. What better fantasy than the last time you had sex with your husband and it went really well? So I think there's that. I found this little game that is kind of an interesting thing, and what it does is you can throw out, you can make this up at your house. I mean, it throws out 3 different little scenarios. One is like a flashlight, a map, and an open window. And so you put these things in a story, but the story ends up with you having sex with your spouse. And so there's kind of some fun, playfulness, some fantasy to go with that. I think fantasy is also one of those areas that you can get on the edge really quickly and fall off the edge really quickly with. And so some people just probably shouldn't go there. And yet I think there's room for it when it's disciplined.
Right.
And you can keep it under these guises.
Something in the scripture where he talks about Paul saying that all things are permissible to me, but that doesn't mean all things are good for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
And
knowing
yeah,
knowing my lines, knowing what's good for me, knowing what's not good for me. Trying to, even falling off maybe once and going, okay, so I just don't get on that cliff again. You know what I mean? But there's
Yeah, I
a
think-
lot less God condemns than we think he does when it comes to our sexuality.
Yeah, I think there's a great deal of freedom, and but I think it's also, you talked about novelty. You know, we crave novelty. Our adolescent minds crave you watch an adolescent drive his car. Let's go see what happens. You know, and so if it's novel, our body and mind and brain are reacting to that, something new. And that's why pornography works. Average amount of pornography watched in any session is 7 minutes at a time, 7 to 8 minutes. That's because the novelty's worn off, and we're ramping it up. And so our brains love that. The dopamine hit goes off, it's all fun. That's why fantasies work, because the dopamine in your brain is going off. But the problem is that you can overdo that and do it so much that you have to have more and more and more.
Yep. So I don't know this, but it says, do you know what this means? Sexta Ferreira. Ferreira.
That was mine.
So what does that mean?
It was
Neil?
for a little laugh, but to talk about perception. So that's a Portuguese word, and it's pronounced sexta-feira,
Oh, okay.
not sexta. It means Friday.
Means Friday?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
But can you imagine what would go through people's minds
Yeah.
if they read that and they don't understand it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're in Portugal, you're having sex on Friday.
See?
I hope you.
You got another one? Want me to do it?
Yeah,
Oh, that wasn't a real one? That one didn't count?
No, that would count.
So it says, how can I find what I need for myself in sex, besides just an orgasm and what my husband wants? I only know what I've done and heard of, and sometimes I'm a little more timid to try new things, but want for the sake of my marriage and fulfillment of sex. So again, I think it's important to know that you have permission to explore, but also you don't know what you don't know, and that's fair. So be very kind to yourself, like, why don't I know more stuff, or why don't I know how to make this more exciting or interesting? You don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? But there are a ton of Christian resources out there that can guide you in a good direction of revealing some of this stuff to you. Again, the Celebration of Sex has got just a ton of stuff in it. Mm-hmm. More than just intercourse, but how to give a sensual massage and things like that are in there. Mm-hmm. So that would be the part about trying new things. Let me go back up to the top again. How can I find what I need for myself in sex? Well, I hope too that if I have the mindset now that sex is worship, worship is meant to draw me to someone. Let that be what I'm searching for in my sexual experience. I'm just looking to be drawn to you. Like, let your body speak that message to you, even over what necessarily feels good. What draws me to this person? Because there isn't anything more fulfilling than that in the midst of having sex. So I don't know, it's always about, it's not always about pleasure. You know, it's about the closeness and the bond that comes. And in the closeness comes the pleasure. I think we think that in the pleasure comes the closeness, but I don't know if we don't have the cart before the horse in that scenario. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, because when in that closeness, there's the security, there's the relaxation, there's the freedom, the surrender, and that's, I think, when it really can move into something much more enjoyable and fun.
Okay.
This kind of goes along with that to some degree. It says, as we age, sex doesn't always work out as well as in our youthful years. What, if anything, can or should we do to minimize the negative impact or just maybe even disappointment? I think one is as we age, it's what I was saying earlier, is that things may not go as fast. They probably slow down. You may need more stimulation. I think there's room for maybe even new positions as ailments and physicality become a problem. You might not be able to do the same way. You might have to look into that. That's the beauty of it, when you can have a conversation and talk and have the clear understanding of what's expected, that if we have intercourse or not, it's okay. That we've had closeness and that we can really make that good enough. I think there are a lot of things that can be done. For a lot of women, the vaginal lubrication becomes a real big issue. Man, just slather that stuff on and go for it. There's not limitations to those things. Try and stimulate differently. Again, and there are disappointments. I mean, there's disappointments even when you're young. And the ability to tolerate that disappointment, this is not the end of the earth, it's disappointing. But I still have you, and we're still good, and we're still going to be okay with this, because it's not the be-all, end-all.
Someone says, how can you visit more fantasy sexual scenarios without causing desire to view fantasy porn? So I kind of want to unlink those two, though, because just because it's fantasy doesn't mean it's going to make me more likely to view porn or not, based on us acting that out in our marriages or in our sexual relationship. My desire to view porn has nothing to do with the fact that it might be fantasy-based or not, you know what I mean? So that heart issue of looking for something outside my marriage that might satisfy me is separate from the fantasy part. And I think you spoke to the fantasy part already. There's room for that. There's room for that. Now, what it's not is I'm not looking to go find it in porn because it's fantasy. And that's what I guess I want to unlink in that thought or that idea, is that because it's fantasy, it must mean that he or she wants to go look at, or it might lead to them looking at porn. I think that what's leading me to look at porn is something totally different. And again, if it's a heart issue or if it's not recognizing that number 4, it's meant to only be us. You know what I mean? Again, God has very low tolerance in my worship of Him to allow for other smaller gods.
You don't share.
You don't share. You know what I mean? When it comes to that, and that is meant to be paralleled in my sexual relationship. So I say with the fantasy part, again, go for it. Like again, if you're both in it, it doesn't feel it builds you both up. That's all good. Go knock yourself out. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a second one. What are some good ways to initiate sex without just asking? Oh yeah, absolutely. So I love handwritten notes. I think are awesome. You get to find those. If somebody takes some kind of lunch to work or in their car, a text is awesome. You have, again, the longer, different, deeper kisses that can say everything. Your body can say everything that your mouth doesn't want to if you wanted to. I love the jalapeno or something like that. You know what I mean? Like having something that we know this means that it's on the table tonight if you want it to be. So coming up with your own thing, how fun could that even be? You know what I mean? Especially, I think it's fun, even with kids in the house, them not knowing and being like a big old magnet on the fridge, and they have no idea what the heck the magnet means if it's faced one way or faced the other way. I think it's just fun, they're not knowing, but you guys knowing, and it's like your secret. So that makes it fun, you know what I mean? Because that's just
I think everybody should have a secret language of what their initiation, and I think that's great.
Okay,
because
almost
it's
code
yours.
words?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, whatever it is. You make a sandwich or whatever.
Go for whatever. So I do think there's a lot of ways to do it. But I would also, I guess as a man, I would just say I'm not discouraging any other ways, but man, it's sexy when my wife is just like, I want to have sex with you. You know what I mean? There's something so, in the simplicity and the directness about it, that is so fulfilling. So I just would add that too. It doesn't always have to be, you don't have to Pinterest this, you know what I mean, and have all these different things. It could be that basic sometimes.
Or there's a pin for it, I'm sure, somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's pinned up there, I imagine. But
yeah.
it's good.
And that's a good one. I think that's also a good conversation to have over dinner sometime. Is what's a neat way? What do you like about that? Women love to be pursued. They won't love demand, and they don't love you begging, but they like your pursuit. And so I think that's real sensual and makes that a good thing. Here's a tough one.